Australia. When they did not return to Tullery, they spent a lot of time caring for their enormous cat population they dearly loved. They also were preoccupied with the beautification of their garden, which boasted roses, palms, herbs, vegetables, ducks, pheasants, statues, and many exquisite water features.
One day, sitting by the fire whilst opening the mail, Jeannie found to her great distress that the banks were asking for huge payments of money that they apparently owed. She asked the maid to fetch her younger sister Margaret. On this day, they questioned themselves. Had they been too complacent? Did they naively leave the door open to thieves because their most prized possession, their beautiful home Tullery, was now in huge debt to the bank? A debt that seemed to be growing at an alarming rate. Why had they not been more astute? Why did they never learn to farm the property themselves? More and more they fretted and fearfully asked themselves, when will their brother be returning from this dreadfully long war? Will Peter ever return? World War I had been such a long, ugly piece of history. Their household staff were often in tears as many families received bad news of loved ones fallen or missing in action. Margaret and Jeannie were extremely worried about their younger brother stolen to the war.
The year is 1915 and the sisters received news that their brother was now in Gallipoli. Margaret and Jeannie spoke with their manager, Mr. Abbott, who informed the ladies that he was concerned about the growing incidence of cattle rustling on their property. Jeannie then inquired about the new cattle accounts. Where were all the new cattle they had bought? The loss cannot be accounted for, and she was very distraught to be told by Mr. Abbott, that their cattle were not branded. Given this, they would not be able to identify them even if they were found. The new stolen cattle were another huge loss to Tullery. Mr. Abbott told them he would need more men if they were to stop the cattle rustling. Jeannie and Margaret naively hired more men, which of course meant further expense.
These men, however, did not protect Tullery's cattle. On the contrary, they loosened fences, making it even easier for the cattle to be stolen. With Abbott's lack of management and concern for the improvement of the property, Tullery's rich pastures soon turned into land that was slowly being replaced by weeds. The river's drains, which were not kept clear, were choking with debris, and soon water crept into what had always been fertile farm grasslands. The sisters noticed their land looked very poor and eventually inquired about whether this may be due to heavier rainfalls over Tullery. However, they were told that this was not the case. Their land, built on natural wetlands and now neglected, was now returning back to nature. The amount of grass needed to keep the cattle was alarmingly diminishing. The land was very wet, and this was only summer, the driest season. What will winter bring? Black swans nested close by the homestead. Jeannie and Margaret loved the water birds, even though they knew the land was swampy. Our next song is called The Black Swans, and it's sung by Patricia. Thank you, Gabriel.
I'm calling them to
I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling them to me. And when the grass is greener on the other side, but I'm just here, no need to die. For all will be well on earth again when the soldiers return to home again. I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling them to me. Calling. The black swans, I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling. The black swans, I'm calling them to me. Calling, 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 I'm calling them to me. Calling, 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 I'm calling them to me. I'm calling the black swans, I'm calling the black swans, I'm calling the black swans, I'm calling them to me. I'm calling them to me.
A few years later, in 1917, the sisters were very distressed and wrote asking for help from their sister Anna, who had their own property. Anna arrived as soon as she could and brought her 2-year-old son Clem with her. Anna was a married woman and much more practical than her seasoned travelling sisters. She was quite shocked at the state of her sisters' affairs. She advised them to sell some of the land to clear some debts. She also suggested to her sisters to get rid of her household staff, minimise the farm hands and stop entertaining. She also insisted they hire a valuer to assess the property. It was 1918 and news was spreading through the city streets of Melbourne that the soldiers would be returning home after a long war. On the 11th of November 1918, folk celebrated the armistice. The war was over. Their brother Peter would be coming home. Jeannie and Margaret travelled to the Melbourne dockyards to pick up their brother Peter, who had been away fighting. They were warned that he had not returned on a regular troop ship. In fact, he was on a hospital ship. It was only then that the sisters realised that Peter would not be in any condition to oversee their property. He was very sick and would require extensive nursing. The whole family evaluated how to provide the best care for Peter. It had become clear to Margaret and Jenny that their sick brother would need complete rest. Peter must return to his small farm to be nearer his brother. He would probably never work again for himself or his sisters. This song, Say It Again, is about the shock of acknowledging that their life, the life they had known and loved, will now be very different because they're in heaps of debt and they have no one to help them. This is called Say It Again. Midnight is chime, the magic is appearing.
company decided to take Anna's advice. They would sell 110 to 120 acres of the Tullery property to pay their bills. Given the size of the property, 2,700 acres, overall, this represented only a small amount of land for the Clement heiresses. The land was sold. However, the money accrued from the sale of the land did not last as long as they thought it would, and once again they fell into debt. They took Anna's advice and hired a highly recommended property valuer from Collins Street, Melbourne. The valuer, Mr. Martin, had the enormous task of putting a figure on the property of Tullery. He took 2 whole days to assess the value of the fallen beauty, and his final assessment was very bad news for the sisters.
The beautiful house was in need of extensive repair, particularly the sheds, cottages and coach house, which had been badly neglected. He most urgently stressed that the fences would not hold the cattle in. The posts were loose and were not strong enough to hold the stock, which would make adjustment impossible. However, the drains were the most critical point. They were clogged and in need of urgent attention immediately. There were 6 drains flowing into Tullery. These drains were originally built to help return the water back to the river. This meant that the farmland would be kept in moist enough to ensure the growth of good pasture. It would also mean that the wetlands would be kept at bay so as to maintain a stock of cattle in good health. Foot trot in cattle was something to be avoided at all costs. This occurs where cattle live on damp, muddy land. The overall result was a great loss of livestock. The 6 drains on Tullery that were built to take the water away and back to the river were now filled with weeds and urgently needed attention. It was clear that Tullery could not operate as a farm without the drains being cleared. If steps were not taken immediately, even more land would be lost. The earning power of the property would be significantly reduced and the cost of reclaiming the land would increase.
Mr. Martin estimated that the clearing of the drains would cost between £2 and £4 per acre. The price would return Tullery back to the land, and that would be land that would be good to reduce cattle on again. He estimated Tullery's current market value to be worth about £39,000. The sisters were horrified at this amount, as it was worth 10 times that amount a few years prior. Jeannie realised she had a 6th share of her inheritance that she could sell. She wrote to her mother asking for her shares to be sold. However, the inheritance of £5,100 lasted for a short while. When this ran out, they sold off 100 hectares. The money was spent quickly, and the sisters, though still entertaining, but at a lesser extent. They finally realised for the first time in their lives that they had been living in a surreal world of wealth, which was now fading away. The sisters loved Tullery and the Tarwin River and wanted to stay forever in their home. It was very difficult for them too, as they had no longer the service of their coach and driver. These days they walked for their supplies. Now it was becoming harder and harder with every week that passed, as the approaching waterline was appearing on a regular occurrence. The next song is called Waterline, and then we're having a break.
Days of summer draw to a close. Quickly do the years pass. I know I'm growing old. I know now. I slowly read the sign. The Tarwin's rising higher as it takes me to the waterline. Each day's a battle. In pain, I look to the horizon every time it rains. Must I the waterline, to the waterline.